Another guy who talked after the draft was Joe Dumars because he was asked about his decision to trade the 23rd pick with an unprotected 2026 first from the Bucks or the Pelicans to move up 10 spots and get Derik Queen. It was their second lottery pick. They drafted Jeremiah Fears, a guard out of Oklahoma, with the seventh pick. Derik Queen, Maryland big man with the 13th pick. And then in the second round, they got Micah Peavy out of Georgetown with the 40th overall pick. Tom, I want to redo on this Pelicans conversation because on the night of the draft, all the craziness and the insanity during our live show we did at Yahoo Sports, I didn't realize they gave up an unprotected 2026 first in that moment. I was just fixated on, they traded up and got Queen. And then post-game show had King and Vinny on. We just kind of glossed over it. And the craziness of that night, 12:30 a.m. recording from my pod that night, we didn't hit this as in the way that we need to. And I think there's two ways to look at it. A, the way everybody's looking at it. The Pelicans are nuts. They are dysfunctional. Joe Dumars is driving that franchise into the ground again. He traded the Pacers first away too soon. Halliburton gets hurt. Now that first could be highly valuable. And then he trades an unprotected 2026 first from the Pelicans, who are in the loaded West, or the Bucks, who could trade Giannis still, to move up 10 spots for Derik Queen, who is anything but a certainty to be a success in the NBA, considering his conditioning issues, considering his lack of defense, considering his lack of a jumper. And now you put him in New Orleans, the po' boy capital of the world. I gain weight every time I go to New Orleans. And Zion gained a lot of weight there, too. And for Derik Queen, is not the place to be. Okay, so he gave us up that pick to move up 10 spots. That's one way to look at it. And that's all fair. The other way is, the other way is, do they have something cooking, Tom? Like, do the Pelicans have another move lined up that we don't know about that makes it make sense for them to give up next year's pick? Or am I giving them too much credit for thinking logically to even entertain the possibility that the Pelicans have another move or two coming this offseason that makes them a clear-cut top team in the Western Conference where you're not concerned about that pick next year and that you're only feeling good about Derik Queen? Could they have something cooking, or is this just them being an incompetent franchise, Joe Dumars still being a horrible general manager? What side do you land on here?
Do you think Joe Dumars thought he was trading for Michael Jordan rather than Jordan Poole? Because, that's the only explanation I can come up with. They traded for Jordan Poole days before trading their 26 first-round pick, which, let's remind the audience here, the 26 Pelicans pick is also a super pick. It's a super first because they could swap it with Milwaukee, right? They have the ability to say, all right, do we want our pick? Or, Milwaukee, they just became, a 20-win team, and we're going to swap our pick for that one. You have the option. It is maybe the most valuable 2026 pick in the draft. The fact that they gave that up just to move 10 picks up after you trade away CJ McCollum. By the way, CJ McCollum, if you're arguing that this team is built to be much better next year and a win now team, you don't trade CJ McCollum. When CJ McCollum was on the Pelicans, they were a 25-win team last year with him on the floor. They were 4-22 without CJ McCollum last year, a 12-win team over 82 games. And then you trade for Jordan Poole, who was coming from an 18-win team that was 15-53 when he was playing. What are you doing? This is nonsensical. The fact that they traded for Jordan Poole and then went ahead and traded their 2026 as if they're going to be great next year. This is, Kev, it could be the number one overall pick. Let's just point out that it could be the number one overall pick that the New Orleans Pelicans just traded away next year. Not saying it's likely, but it could be the number one overall pick. And it reminds me of Neil O'Shea back in, 2011, when he traded Baron Davis to Cleveland for Mo Williams and attached the 2011 unprotected pick to go get Mo Williams because, hey, Mo Williams is an all-star. Got to bring him in. And thank you, Baron Davis, for your leadership over here. I know Blake Griffin loves you, but hey, we don't love the draft in 2011. They're not. Why? Who cares about, drafting a 19-year-old? That pick turned into Kyrie Irving and went number one overall. Okay. They didn't think it was going to land number one. Of course, the Dallas Mavericks didn't think they were going to land number one. Let's also remember the 2012 Damian Lillard. That wasn't the Blazers pick. That was actually the Brooklyn pick that they got in a trade for Gerald Wallace. And then they end up with Damian Lillard. 2017, the number 3 pick the Sixers had because Sacramento, Vlade Divac took over for Sacramento and said, we need to dump all this salary. Carl Landry, Jason Thompson, we need to get rid of this salary because we need to go chase free agents in the offseason. And Sam Hinkie in Philly was like, oh, great. Let's take a pick swap in 16, a pick swap in 17. And Vlade Divac like, what are the odds that 17 pick swap will really turn into anything? It turned into Jason Tatum. Okay. The number 3 pick in the 2017 draft turned into Jason Tatum because with the number 3 pick and they swapped out, they ended up going to get Markelle Fultz at number 1. And of course, that pick swap turned into Jason Tatum. Let's talk about 2019. DeAndre Hunter in that pick swap, like the New York, the Lakers, that wasn't the fact that they got number 4, went to New Orleans, ended up with Atlanta. That was also a traded pick that ended up being a number 4 pick. And then last year, Reed Shepherd, the number 3 pick, that was via Brooklyn going to Houston. So it's like, it's not out of the realm that this future first unprotected that can be swapped with the Milwaukee Bucks ends up being a top 4, top 5 pick. And it could be number 1. We have seen it in NBA history, whether it's Kyrie Irving or others with a Jason Tatum trade back in 2017. This is possibly the worst trade of the last decade if that happens, if they end up losing the number 1 overall pick just because they love Derik Queen.
Especially with the 2026 draft class. Last night, I made a post saying how, as great as the 2025 draft was and as fun as this was, 2026 draft is even more loaded because between Darren Peterson and Cam Boozer and AJ DiBonta, you have 3 clear-cut number 1 pick quality guys, and that's not even factoring in Nate Ament among like a bunch of other guys who could develop a lot over the next year and play into that top 3 or even into the number 1 conversation. You cannot rule that out happening over the next year. And people replied saying, well, you draft people do this every year. You always say next year is better. That's not true. That is not true. A year ago in 2025, there was way more uncertainty about some of these guys behind Cooper Flagg. Cooper Flagg was the only certainty. And other than that, it was like Ace Bailey could be great. Dylan Harper could be great, but there's no guarantee about some of these guys as number 1 pick quality. Next year, there's at least 3 Cooper Flaggs. That's what next year is. And so you don't have to get the number 1 pick to get a guy who can change your franchise next year. And depending on how things develop, there could be even more of them. And so for New Orleans to do this deal is a monumental risk. And for the Hawks to get this pick, it continues a run of this new look Hawks front office nailing it. I like the Porzingis deal for them. Asen Newell at 23. I thought they would take him at 13, and then they get him 10 spots down at 23. Such a massive victory for that new front office to get these guys. Hawks are nailing it so far. There's a number of other teams, Tom, that I think have some of my favorite draft hauls as well.